So attendees,
I'm going to start sharing screen. Okay, Evan?
Yep.
good morning, afternoon, or possibly even evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to another session of the Generative AI in Libraries, or GALE conference. This session is Data Visualization, Licensing, and Other Generative AI Initiatives at Minnesota State University, Mankato. My name is Chris Stacy Bates. I'll be the moderator for this session. Before we begin, we have a few reminders. We do have a code of conduct that we adhere to for this conference, and I'm posting the link to that in chat now. If you have any concerns about conduct of anyone in the conference, you can use the Gen AI in Libraries email address that's also now been posted in chat with any concerns. We will be holding responses to questions until the end of the presentation, but you are welcome to go ahead and post them in either the chat or the Q&A box. The session is being recorded. You can enable captions by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. And now the presenters for our session are Nat Gustafson-Sundell and Evan Rusch from Minnesota State University, Mankato. I did not realize that should be such a tongue twister. They collaborate on the library's collection management technology team, along with other colleagues, and they have presented many times together on their collection analysis research. Please join me in welcoming Nat and Evan.
Well, thank you so much. So my name is Evan. My colleague Nat and I are librarians from Minnesota State University, Mankato. It's a regional public comprehensive university of about 14,000 students. And again, thank you to everybody for having us. I'll start by providing a brief overview of a collaboration that Nat and I have been working on regarding novelty visualization for collections data that we presented at the SUNY Law Conference earlier this year. Then Nat's going to take it from there and provide an overview of multiple initiatives that our library has undertaken to both utilize AI to improve work processes and to engage faculty, students, and professional colleagues. Our slides are posted to a library guide linked here, along with other projects we've been working on if you want to give it a look. Okay, so at Minnesota State University Mankato, we've developed collection analysis and data visualization resources over many years. We've put a lot of energy into developing charts and tables to tell a story and communicate about our collections. Like with many other aspects of what we do as librarians, we're investigating ways that AI could be used to enhance or improve our work. While we have seen others who have used AI to efficiently and effectively generate charts and graphs as a part of collection analysis, right now we feel pretty comfortable with what we can do with the traditional tools for this purpose. What piqued our interest was the use of AI image generation. Images or illustrations that would have previously required considerable planning or the hiring of a graphic designer or artist can now be generated on a whim in seconds. Could AI-generated illustrations replace traditional charts and graphs and generally enhance our communication? Our early experiments suggest some mixed results, but let me take a step back to better clarify what we were hoping to accomplish. Our initial idea was whether AI image generators like DALL-E 3 could create illustrations of actual data, not just charts or tables, but as pictures, where the objects in the picture represent data. The goal was to create images that depicted quantities accurately. Also, we wondered, was it possible to depict two variable data relationships? For example, cost per use, where the proportions of objects in the picture would be quantitatively accurate for both the cost numbers and the usage numbers. Early experiments proved challenging. The problem seems to be that DALL-E 3, as of right now, does not do well with interpreting numbers. Here's an example in which I wanted to create 4 buildings with a number of stories corresponding to a range of data. After a couple of tries, I got close, as these buildings in front are actually close to the distribution I proposed, although I suspect that's more of a coincidence. But DALL-E 3 struggled with both the number of buildings I asked for and their size. Here you can see an attempt Nat made with lumberjacks of differing heights. Again, DALL-E 3 was not able to interpret the numbers effectively. And if you look closely, you can see the numbers on the sides and above the lumberjacks are pretty random, not reflect the data we were hoping to use. So we haven't been able to create illustrations that represent data exactly as we had hoped. But let me clarify what success might look like. Say I was trying to communicate the value of one of our journal packages. This journal package costs around a fifth of the cost of one of our other big deals, but its usage is greater proportionally to its cost. Could we create a novelty visualization depicting the overall cost and usage of this package relative to the larger and more expensive package? In this example, the size of the stick figures equates to the cost of the packages, while the size of the implement in the person's hand equates to usage. Overall, the image would show the usage relative to cost. The benefit of AI image generation is we could take this example and apply whatever appropriate metaphor made sense for the stick person and for the implement they are holding. So would a monster or a scholar make sense for the person? Perhaps a weapon or a book for the implement. We explored other examples of two variable concepts and tried to develop images that could create a metaphor for some point we were trying to communicate. One example that we really liked was this illustration where the size of the dragon could roughly equate to the cost of a journal package. And then the pile of gold could equate to the number of citable documents. So essentially the number of articles published by the package. Or this example, which I'm a fan of, it's the size of the county fair pig could be determined by the number of journal titles in a package, but the size of the ribbon would be reflective of the portion of those that are highly cited or high impact journals. The point is that we would be communicating on two levels, both providing proportional images that could serve as an alternative to charts and graphs, and secondly, enhance our messaging with whatever metaphor the image created. So even if we can't yet create illustrations that accurately represent data, it has helped us think about how we might use imagery as a part of our collection analysis messaging. Our audience can vary significantly from faculty to administrators to our library colleagues, and therefore their knowledge, understanding, and interest can be equally varied. How might images help get our message across when there are differing comfort levels with data or other aspects of collections work? So here's some ideas that we came up with. It can help us grab the attention of our audience or change the tone of a presentation. Images can lighten the mood or connect with the audience member who might glaze over at the sight of traditional data visualization. Secondly, novelty visualizations might help us deepen our audience's understanding or help bring home a point. Rather than replacing traditional charts and graphs, might images serve as a supplement to the points we are trying to get across, excuse me. So after showing a data table or a complex chart, we could share the novelty visualization suggesting, so to put this another way. A third is we can also create a lasting impression and provide points we can refer back to. We might be able to say, after showing the image of the pigs at the county fair, hey, this is a big ribbon kind of journal package. Whether we're talking about piles of gold or pigs at the county fair, novelty visualizations could give us a shorthand for concepts that might allow for lasting impressions and reference points in future discussions. And then lastly, novelty visualizations can add to our narrative and potentially be more convincing. If we can make the expensive journal package seem less like a burden to our budget and more as something providing the biggest pile of riches, we might be able to shape impressions and better justify our collection's budget. So if DALL-E 3 struggles with numbers, there are still ways that we can represent data using AI-generated imagery. Well, not as complex as our initial goals mentioned earlier, we can take simple charts and create illustrations that can make an impression while also representing data. This example is taking something that could be in a simple bar chart to represent journal usage in one journal package. In this case, DALL-E 3 cannot create the chart type appearance you see here, but the individual images can be generated with AI and then positioned to give this chart type appearance. In this case, we can demonstrate the concern that 80% of a particular package's journals have low usage numbers, and we can create the lasting impression of that idea by depicting those low use titles as zombie journals. We could also take AI-generated images and resize them to represent numbers and make then comparisons. So like in this example, which utilized simple infographic type beakers to represent chemistry journal usage. For images to be effective representations of data, there need to be contrast and size. We can generate images where the contrast might not connect directly to the data we have, but the images can show a symbolic contrast. For instance, say we wanted to demonstrate that a package has a high cost per use. We could compare two images where one represents average cost per use and the other represents a weaker package with a higher cost per use. In this example, the top factory represents an average cost per use and the bottom shows a weaker package. The steam or smoke coming from the smokestacks isn't precisely proportional to the cost per use, but does symbolize that the higher CPU has greater plume of smoke and thus is more problematic. The use of steam or smoke helps us communicate that greater cost per use number has a negative connotation and hopefully would create a lasting impression and future reference point for discussing cost per use with colleagues across campus. In this example, the choice of image is a key component to creating the impression. We have tended to refer to these images as metaphors. In this scenario, part of the metaphor selection relates to whether the concept connotes a negative or positive impression. Zombies and pollution give us a negative connotation, where a pile of riches or a county fair ribbon might create a positive one. We've learned a few things from playing around with AI images for communicating about our collection analysis work. AI-generated images can be busy or overly complicated. This might add noise and muddle the message we're trying to get across. It often takes extra effort to generate simple and effective images. There are also some risks with using imagery in this way. Some might see the images as less serious. While we might be able to create a lasting and perhaps even fun impression, it is also important that we don't undermine our message and perhaps our credibility with the images we choose. We also might not consider connotations others might place on the images we choose. AI can create images that further stereotypes and are rightfully seen as offensive. We must be vigilant that we are not causing harm by our choice of images. The biggest issue is that as of right now, DALL-E 3 does not handle numbers well. This adds challenges to creating images that demonstrate proportionality. I've mentioned a few techniques for representing data through illustrations in spite of this challenge, but this will continue to be something that we will play with as the technology evolves. So while we've considered a variety of ideas of how we might use novelty visualizations in our work, we have incorporated AI-generated imagery into a collection analysis project we just presented on last week at NASIG. The slide here is from a package-level report that demonstrates the attributes of individual journal packages. We have created images to correspond with various attributes we are emphasizing. The images are meant to create a lasting impression and a potential reference point for future conversations. We are working on developing a small library of images we can use to demonstrate concepts in our collection analysis work. At this point, some of this is frankly just plain fun to see what we can develop. So we'll see where this goes as the technology and our skills improve. At this point, I'm going to pass things over to Nat. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Thanks, Evan. Now I'll provide an overview of other AI-related initiatives we've undertaken at our library in the past year. At NASIG last week, I attended some sessions on AI, and I was very impressed by what other librarians are doing. However, I also know many librarians have not yet had much time to engage with AI. I'm not sure what to expect from this audience, so I'll tune my comments somewhere between the experts and the novices, maybe to bounce back and forth. I'd say there's 4 main categories for the initiatives we've undertaken at our library. 1, faculty engagement, 2, professional engagement, 3, student engagement, and 4, task enhancement. A 5th category could be organizational engagement, which would include serving on committees to develop guidance and so forth, but I'm not addressing that category here. Didn't want to advance. I listed faculty engagement first because that's how I started the year. I collaborated with 2 colleagues to present 5 tips for teaching with AI through our university's Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. As presenters, the 3 of us wanted to stress open-mindedness to AI. We encouraged our faculty to explore applications of AI in the classroom and for assignments. Of course, a problem with AI is that we can't simply be open-minded and optimistic about it. There are also many areas for concern and caution, so of course we touched on these too. Some of what we said might have sounded restrictive. I personally talked about topics of importance to the library in my areas of expertise, such as licensing and copyright concerns. My section was entitled ChatGPT as an Information Source, and I'll share some of my slides from that talk. At the time, there was very little information in the library world about copyright concerns, so I relied on sources like Stanford's HAI and Bloomberg Law. Since then, I've attended 2 presentations by attorneys who serve libraries, but neither significantly updated the picture. In general, we're still waiting for clarification from the courts to emerge. As users of public large language models, or LLMs, we can't really do anything about the fact that they've been trained on copyrighted content. Because of this, we might need to be concerned about outputs that look too much like copyrighted source materials. I think it's very important to cite or credit chatbots whenever we use their outputs, in the first place to be good information citizens, but also to protect ourselves. In some cases, we might even want to double check the outputs depending on how we plan to use them to see if we can backtrack to related copyrighted content. On the licensing side, I've seen very few new problematic terms appear, but others might be seeing these more often, or at least it can seem that way depending on the messenger. It does not seem to me that most vendors are creating significant new restrictions, except the few that already have AI products sold separately, which they're trying to protect. Personally, I think most content owners and content packagers will eventually need to add AI enhancement as free services, as JSTOR has done, to remain competitive. I don't think vendors will be able to sell these services separately for most use cases, but of course it depends on what the market will bear. I'll mention my license-related concerns about using chatbots for article summarization in a little bit. For the 5 tips presentation, I also talked about the information generated by ChatGPT specifically. The concept of hallucinations was still new to many people at that time. I would explain that chatbots are actually generating text, not quoting or referencing text, so the information content is probable, not certain. Some people refer to chatbots as, quote, stochastic parrots. Personally, it has struck me that humans seem also to be stochastic parrots when it comes down to it, which doesn't mean they can't think. People generate outputs and assign weight to both inputs and outputs based on their training data, how they were raised, where, when, by whom, and so on. Given the range of cognitive biases bending and constraining human thought, such as anchoring, confirmation bias, and so on, people seem to me to have thinking constraints possibly deeper and more concerning than the biases of chatbots, where bias is in the training data, not necessarily in the learning system itself. At the time of the presentation, ChatGPT could not and would not cite its sources when asked outright. It now has capabilities along the lines of Perplexity, which is a different kind of chatbot. Perplexity is a hybrid search engine and text generator. I think the 5 tips presentation was probably helpful for some faculty, but so much has changed since then that it's hardly worthwhile to glance back at it. I'm sure this is a familiar challenge to many of the people at this conference who teach about AI or with AI. Our statements age very, very quickly. I don't want to overstate the obvious, but I think this is one of the key challenges of teaching AI. We must continuously refamiliarize ourselves with changing features and changing products. When communicating with novices, communication can be confusing because we might need to riddle our statements with caveats, or if we don't, what we say might be proven wrong over time. So, for example, I presented ChatGPT plugins, including Scholar AI, to a few audiences in the fall semester. At the time, I didn't even think to warn my audiences that these products might go away. I certainly didn't expect them to disappear so quickly. Among our 5 tips for teaching, I think the practical advice was most appreciated by faculty, such as sample syllabus statements. About a week after the 5 tips presentation, a colleague and I presented to a regional group of librarians. The topics included effective prompting, the limits of chatbots as information sources, tools for article summarization, AI discovery tools like Consensus, and again, copyright and licensing concerns. For many librarians in the audience, it was their first time seeing generative AI in action. I think that librarians should play a key role helping faculty and students learn how to use generative AI responsibly and effectively, just as we teach information literacy. If the presentation provided any audience member with some talking points or some inspiration to start exploring AI on their own, then the presentation was worthwhile. Excuse me. For this presentation, I relied on live demonstrations. I felt it was important to show just how easy it was to use a chatbot and how versatile it could be. In the example on the screen, I showed how ChatGPT could summarize the emotions expressed in a text. For any librarians familiar with the digital humanities and earlier products on the trajectory to generative AI, like the topic modeling tool, this kind of exercise would have been familiar. The live demonstration also allowed me to show how chatbot responses could be variable and how the variability of responses could be controlled to some extent depending on the prompting approach, just as search engine results depend on the search terms. The live demonstration allowed us to have some fun. For example, when ChatGPT translated the first stanza of John Donne's poem, Death, Be Not Proud, into pirate, Arr, death, ye be not boasting. I think most people who've used generative AI know that it's fun. I think it can be important to show novices how AI can be fun so they feel more comfortable playing with it. I've encountered prejudice against AI, which is baffling to me. So when presenting, I've usually included some fun activities. I'll return to this point later when I talk about a workshop our library offered to area high school students. The presentation was a full hour long, so I can't repeat all of my points here. And in any case, many of my points are probably obsolete now. For this presentation, I covered the copyright and licensing concerns in a little more depth than I did for the 5 tips presentation. If I had to pick my main concern from this presentation for our university community, which is still a concern for me now, it's the problem of article summarization. So I'll expand on those comments here. Most licenses provide limited rights to use individual articles. For example, most licenses provide rights to upload individual articles to secure networks, such as electronic course reserve systems or course management systems. On the flip side, probably all licenses prohibit uploading articles on public or non-secure networks. If students or faculty want to use AI to summarize licensed articles they get from the library, they may be limited by license prohibitions. For their part, it's my impression that the AI companies also prohibit users from uploading files if users don't have the right to do so. But at the same time, these tools functionally enable such uploads. If users want to summarize individual articles, I personally think it's safest to advise them only to upload OA and public domain articles at this time. Of course, the problem is that article summarization is a killer app, so it might prove an irresistible temptation for some people to use licensed content. Speaking of OA, I would expect to see the rise of an LLM trained exclusively on OA scholarly articles soon, which could include article discovery, summarization, interaction, and synthesis of sets of articles all in one place. There are also more radical possibilities, maybe a little further in the possible future, such as the one proposed in the article on the screen. The idea here is to forego journals altogether. In this scenario, researchers would upload their data to the AI. The AI would then serve as the scholarly communicator, quickening new knowledge generation, new questions, and new studies. Of course, library vendors are currently building article summarization tools into their own proprietary platforms, but these may not be optimally helpful for scholars working across platforms. Ideally, libraries would work with the vendors to find a solution best for users, maybe something like a secure cross-platform article summarization service. But I'm pessimistic. Libraries and vendors have completely failed to similarly optimize for discovery, so I'm not optimistic about cooperation for article summarization. Some researchers could potentially abandon library discovery for more powerful third-party systems, even if they have to pay for the service. There are plenty of options currently available when it comes to third-party discovery/summarization systems. That said, I don't think the third-party systems are actually good enough to replace library discovery at this time, even with some level of article summarization built in. At best, these systems could only supplement library discovery. The use cases for these systems are currently limited. They provide discovery, but not across all relevant publishers, and they provide article summarization, but their summarization capabilities might not be as powerful or as useful as it could be. I think there's still time for our integrated library systems to catch up, or we might use an institutionally licensed LLM. These might possibly surpass this entire generation of discovery summarization hybrids. But the real question is whether librarians are capable of catching up with the YouTubers, especially if the ILS doesn't do it for them. The third-party systems currently have too many limitations. I haven't spent enough time, and this could be a research project, but it has seemed to me that the Semantic Scholar article database, which provides the basis for many of these services, is not the best across all subject areas. These systems also lack sufficient full-text access, if any, although I'm speaking broadly without conducting a proper investigation. Don't quote my opinion, instead check it for yourself. For the presentation back in August of last year, I did briefly demonstrate the consensus discovery and article summarization tool. On the positive side, I do think these tools can be useful at the reference desk, but again, only as a supplementary discovery tool. I should mention the fact that the brand name large language models are already trained on so-called shadow libraries, which include content across most or maybe all scholarly publishers. So in other words, these big chatbots probably include more scholarly content than the tools built on the Semantic Scholar database. In the past, when I tested the ChatGPT plugin, Scholar AI, which is now a standalone product, it seemed to me that it was possible to get more from it than from a seemingly analogous product like Consensus. However, I did not have time to study the comprehensiveness of the result sets or the saturation of full text access. I suspect, as a plugin, Scholar AI might have had access to the shadow library's data, while the new standalone might be limited to something like the Semantic Scholar database. The website is not transparent on these questions. And anyway, the issue is not whether my memory is correct. Instead, the important thing is to recognize the need to study what these tools are trained on with what implications for results. As librarians, I think we need to study these tools just as closely as we've studied indexes in the past, and we need to share the results with each other, even if AI is a much faster moving target than indexes. From what I understand, there might be some legal contention around using shadow libraries as training data. Major authorities do support training on copyrighted materials, but maybe not if the materials were illicitly obtained. It seems to me that chatbots trained on shadow libraries must be limited in output to generative text and/or summaries. Such outputs are or could be construed to be transformative under American copyright law. I think most scholars will want to be able to do more than just read generated text or summaries. They'll want tools capable of discovery and delivery of full text. They'll want to interact with the full text via the chatbot. They'll want summaries of individual articles, and they'll want to be able to synthesize sets of articles. Heck, users will soon want even more than that, including data extraction, comparison of data across studies, and meta-analysis capabilities. Then they'll want more and more after that. I have not investigated AI tools for any of these latter capabilities yet. By the way, I repeated the image prompt from the last slide. Oop, and now it doesn't want to advance. But I asked Dolly to try a different style. Note how the anthropomorphic AI agents have been transformed in this version, and the work of studying data is something completely new, but we still sit on the knowledge foundation provided by the Codex, which was simply a technology for scholarly communication. Overall, it seems to me that opinions have proliferated since the last time I felt confident in my understanding of the copyright and licensing issues. I haven't recently tried to keep up, given other interests and responsibilities. It could be helpful at some point to make a table listing use cases for licensed and/or copyrighted content alongside the established guidance, as well as speculation about future possibilities across several functions like discovery, summary, interaction, and synthesis. For all I know, somebody might have done that already, but I haven't run across it. And actually, this conference might have provided more information, but I wrote this presentation before this conference. Another hope early in the fall semester 2023 was to develop workshops for our university students, but there was little organizational appetite at the time, and there still isn't at this time, to my knowledge. I've encountered many folks from other libraries who have incorporated generative AI into their instruction. I'm disappointed by my own library's hesitancy to engage as an organization because I think it's crucial for us to help build the future. Instead, I worked with a teacher at a regional high school to develop a full-day workshop for high school students. For this workshop, I focused on how chatbots could support learning and serve as creative partners. On the screen, you can see the agenda. I relied on some material from the previous presentations, but the focus of this workshop was very different, with new sections on topics I had not previously explored in depth or presented. This workshop was absolutely a blast to teach. There were several sections where students were shouting out ideas. In the Chatbots for Learning section, we used both ChatGPT and Claude to create choose-your-own-adventure games in historical settings to learn about history. On the screen, you can see an example based on the Wars of the Roses. We also used ChatGPT to help us learn about the scientific method. I particularly like the prompt on the screen and variations on it because it allows high school students to get started quickly on topics of interest to them. We tested chatbots as tutors. At the time, I thought Claude 2 was best among the chatbots at following the instructions to serve as a tutor. By the way, I found the tutor prompt in a paper entitled Assigning AI, 7 Approaches for Students with Prompts by Malik and Malik, June 11, 2023. It's already been cited 38 times at the time of this writing. Of course, I did caution the students about chatbots as information sources. I demonstrated how ChatGPT could get answers wrong, especially on math problems. I advised them that it's often best to ask a chatbot to explain the steps, how it arrived at an answer. For the workshop, I tried to include numerous fun events. The entire section, AI as a Creative Partner, was fun. We played with ideas about how to develop nonfiction biographies as well as creative fiction. On the screen, there's an example where a player and a chatbot took turns continuing a story. We wrote several stories. At the end of the day, I also asked ChatGPT to tell a story in which each student in the workshop was transformed into a monster. We used an image generator to create pictures of the monsters. DALL-E was not included with ChatGPT at the time, so I used the plugin Michelangelo. By interspersing fun events with more serious topics, the students could burn off excess energy or get re-energized, as the case may be. Because this was a full-day workshop, I also included snack breaks and one calisthenics break. These kinds of breaks also served to break the ice so that students could feel more comfortable interacting within the workshop. After each section, I asked the students to write a brief reflection on something they had learned in the section. At the end of the day, we discussed what we had learned. The students were well prepared because they could just read what they had previously written down. I've never seen so many hands shoot up when I asked them what they had learned. After the discussion, I asked them to write a final reflection. The lead teacher for this workshop later wrote to me, quote, "I got really good feedback from students about the usefulness of this day. The writing they did and engagement were the best I have experienced in an Experience Friday in quite a while." I think student engagement is an area where our library could do much more, both for our university students and for our regional community. When helping students at the reference desk and for research consultations, in the past year, I was several times dismayed to encounter students not using generative AI effectively, never mind responsibly. I think they could be disadvantaged when starting their professional lives. Throughout the year, I found it helpful to use chatbots to supplement some research consultations and reference questions. Of course, there are better information sources than chatbots for scholarly topics, but chatbots have their uses. I think chatbots usually do a great job providing methodologies to approach a question or problem. They can help students get a strong start on new projects, especially for non-scholarly topics. ChatGPT can do a better job faster than I can with many kinds of non-scholarly topics. When I help a student with a research consultation, I try to use the best set of tools for the job, the ones which will be quickest to implement and also authoritative for the topic. I consider chatbots and search chatbot hybrids like Perplexity to be excellent tools for some kinds of problems. In the category of task enhancement, I experimented with using chatbots as licensing assistants. I tested the 3 leading chatbots at the time, ChatGPT, Claude, and Bard. For the NASIG Fall virtual meeting, I presented a video on those experiments. Among the chatbots at the time of my testing, Claude 2 was the best to help with license review. Claude helped me double check for license terms that are typically more troublesome than others. This project was really interesting to me because the final product was greatly simplified from what I initially envisioned. I thought I would need to set up a Jupyter notebook, which is a Python programming environment, and complicated prompts, as well as a template including information about my license terms of interest to achieve a license review assistant. Instead, as I worked on the project, I found myself simplifying with each iteration. I was able to work directly with Claude, not through a Jupyter notebook, and I actually found that simpler prompts worked better than more verbose, complicated prompts, at least for what I was trying to do. I would not be able to replace my own careful reading of a license with a chatbot's review, of course, but I did think Claude's supplementary review was helpful. It's not much fun to read licenses, but by interacting with Claude, it was almost as if the process was gamified. During the latter half of the fall semester and throughout the spring, Evan and I worked on and talked about novelty data visualization in our spare moments. This project really took off simply because OpenAI added DALL-E to ChatGPT. Evan already presented on this project, but I'm mentioning it again because I really enjoyed this project, which we've continued developing. I think pictures are much more powerful than text for communication. After all, as the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Personally, my favorite way to use generative AI is to create images. We've used DALL-E 3 to generate images for just about all of our presentations this year. In the past, I often expended a lot of time to find good images to use in presentations. DALL-E is much quicker to use, although I think DALL-E images tend to share a certain look, especially the color palette and lighting. I don't think there are significant concerns when using images like the one on the screen for presentations. When I performed a Google image search using this image, the only results were for other images created by AI. I used generative AI in many small ways throughout the year. And actually, the reason I'm saying this is I should probably make the point that I actively sought reasons to use AI all year long, which I think is important if one wants to learn how to use it as effectively as possible, although maybe this point goes without saying. Chatbots can serve as helpful consultants to check one's ideas or to start thinking about a project. For example, I was interviewed by the school newspaper during the year. At the time, I was very sick with COVID, but the newspaper's deadline was important, so we scheduled a Zoom meeting. As I prepared a brief presentation to start the interview, I asked ChatGPT for ideas about topics to cover. It was just very reassuring to me at the time, in part because I was suffering terrible brain fog and not to mention fever. I also deliberately tested uses of chatbots as a student. The dean of our library required the librarians at our university to take a locally developed online course on open educational resources. Because of my prior experiences and expertise in this area, I felt like some typical students who want to spend their time on anything but the course materials at hand. I openly declared I would use the opportunity to test how various AI tools might allow me as a student either to cheat, so to speak, or to enhance my results by saving me time or improving the quality of my assignments. Of course, I was careful to note whenever I used AI, including ChatGPT, Scholar AI, Consensus, Perplexity, and Claude. In addition to enhancing my written responses, the most helpful tool was Scholar AI, the old version, because it saved a lot of time as I developed an annotated bibliography. In addition to the initiatives I've already mentioned, I'm currently collaborating with a colleague, Jenny Turner, on a library guide about AI resources for students, which would fall into the student engagement category. At our library, we're providing 2 LibGuides on AI, one designed for students and another designed for faculty. Jenny and I are working on the one for students. We asked the Georgetown University Library for permission to use to base our LibGuide on theirs, which they graciously allowed. So far, we haven't made many changes from their template. I think this is one area where libraries can rely on each other for help with AI teaching. I wonder if there are other areas. My next project is to investigate ChatGPT and other generative AI tools to see how they can help with collection analysis. At MNSU, we already have homegrown state-of-the-art collection analysis tools, which are very cost-effective to implement and use. So I'm actually skeptical ChatGPT could provide a boost at this time, but I'm very curious to see if I'm wrong. At NASIG, I saw some interesting examples using ChatGPT for data analysis. But for most of the examples, I actually thought other tools could perform the work at least as effectively and certainly more authoritatively. Although there was one use case I can't wait to investigate myself. I'm sure chatbots will continue to improve as tools for data analysis. I'm not sure about other future directions. I'm confident we'll continue to use image generators for both novelty visualizations and presentations. I'm also confident I'll continue to use chatbots while helping students and as I explore how to boost my own productivity. I'd like to explore more classes and workshops for students, but I don't know when our library will be ready for that in the upcoming year. Unfortunately, I think our library will move forward as an organization teaching with AI and utilizing AI across more tasks only when there are more models to follow from other universities. Fortunately, though, we can continue experimenting on our own as librarians and attending conferences like this one. So thank you, Gail. It's great to learn what others are doing. Thank you for your time. This deck is available at libguides.mnsu.edu/collection-analysis/research. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I don't know if we've got much time, maybe 4 minutes.
There is one question in the Q&A from Scott. How much time did you spend manually checking the AI's license review output for accuracy?
So as I said, I also think it's important to closely read the license. I didn't spend any extra time. I closely read it, and basically when I interacted with Claude, it was confirming that I had seen the right things. So it was really like a double check. Did I miss something was what I was concerned about. And if it found something, then I would go and review that. If there's no more questions, once again, thank you, Gail. These things are tough to put on, and thank you, Chris, so much for moderating for us.
This has been a great session. Thanks for attending, everyone, and hope you can join us for one of the sessions during our next time block.
Can I just go ahead and